Happy Monday evening, everybody, and welcome to the Nona Boss Continuum. And here we are on another Monday night, and I have another amazing guest for you guys. Another amazing person that I met at the Gatlinburg conference. Tonight, I think it's going to be a real treat. I really do. I feel like there were some amazing people that I met at the conference, which many of you guys have seen the pictures. I mean, you know, it's been amazing. But the conversation that I had with the gentleman that's coming on tonight, it was such a thought-provoking conversation that I had with him. And I was just like, if he would have turned me down and said, I'm not coming on your show, I would have got down on the ground and just begged him to be here because he had a lot of information and it was such an amazing conversation. And I am excited to have him here with us tonight. So let me just real quick, let's go through and do roll call, little roll call. We got Gary Spikes Sr. in the house. He is one of my new membership. He's one of my new membership members. Thank you, Gary, for being here. And we've got Miss Jean Hudson in the house tonight. She says she's going to be listening. And we have Jane. And if Jane is here, that means Carol's here somewhere too. Thank you guys both for always being in my shows. I really appreciate you. And Val, thank you. I'm so glad to see you too. And we've got Brown Dwarf. Hi, Brown Dwarf. It's good to see you. We've got Henry. Henry, you're not supposed to be bouncing around shows tonight. You're supposed to be here at this place. You know, I'm only teasing. Who else is in the house? We have Mr. Roger Blair. Hi, Roger. Let's see. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody? Okay. I know some more people are going to start filing in. In the meantime, let's give Mr. Matt Seeber a introduction and a warm welcome to the show. Matt Seeber was born and raised in East Tennessee, with the exceptions of a couple of years in Texas and Missouri. He's always lived within 10 miles of his birthplace. He's had an interest in the subject of Bigfoot since The Mysterious Monsters was presented by Peter Graves on TV in the 1970s. In 2005, he was plunged deeply into the subject when his then 15-year-old son had an encounter in their backyard in Roane County. Since that time, he has been investigating reports in the area. He has partnered with several researchers, hunters, and hikers, speaking with people and searching for evidence. He has found several tracks and heard several strange things in the woods. However, he is not an eyewitness. He has been fortunate enough to meet many reputable investigators. He has been featured on Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot and Monsters and Mysteries in America. He also has been interviewed on Tubi documentary Scariest Monsters in America. And Matt can also be found on local podcasts. So please, let's give a warm welcome for Mr. Matt Seeber of East Tennessee Bigfoot.
Hey. How y'all doing?
We're doing great. We are so happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, we had such a great time. I don't even know how long I talked to you. Like, we kept just talking and talking, and I'm like,
Yeah.
are there is there a bunch of people that I'm like keeping from like talking to you? Because it was such a great
Yeah.
conversation.
Actually, it was perfect timing. I don't believe anybody showed up while you were there, so it worked out really good. So
Good, good.
yeah,
So okay, so let's go back to this encounter that your 15-year-old son had at the time in your
okay,
backyard. Let's talk a little
okay,
about that.
sure. 2005 summer. I think it was June or July. I believe it was June. He was out of school. And even back then, and I can vouch, even when I was a kid, I did the same thing. If you're out of school for the summer, you're up all night, you sleep all day. He
Mhm.
was playing video games, of course. I didn't have that as an option back then, but I had a truckload of sand that needed to be unloaded, and I wanted him to do. And I told him, I said, son, I don't care when it's done. I just want it done. So he took it upon himself to unload that truck full of sand in our backyard at 2 a.m. Under a security light. There was enough light, and of course, there was a light coming through the kitchen window. He could see what he was doing well enough to do the job. And he went inside to get a drink of water, I believe, something to that effect. Of course, he's not here to give you his account, and I've probably butchered it 1,000 times, as many times as I've told it. But when he came back out, he noticed that there was a dark figure standing behind one of our bird feeders, about 15, 20 feet away.
Mhm.
And he grabbed the shovel and started walking toward it, thinking it was maybe one of his friends from down the road, one of the neighbor's kids. And it turned and began to slowly run, or I guess you'd say jog away. It wasn't a full run. My son said
Mhm.
it loped. It had a funny gait to it when it left, and it walked directly under the security light. And that's when he noticed it was covered with long black hair. Um, he also mentioned the fact that it was about a head taller than the bird feeder, and the bird feeder was 6 feet high. So we're thinking it's probably closer to 7 feet tall. But it was hunched over when it ran, and it ran slowly. It wasn't a very fast kind of run.
Mhm.
And he noticed under its hair that it had charcoal colored skin. And he said it was very, very muscular. He said it was well groomed. For lack of a better word, he said it was beautiful. It wasn't a dirty, matted, muddy kind of a mess. He said it was the hair flowed. And it shined. So he continued to follow it. And I couldn't imagine that, but he continued to
Brave
follow it,
boy.
and it was in our yard. And you would have to know the lay of the land. The back of the house was up on a hill, and the road was around the dog lot and back down to the road. And it ran around the dog lot and down to the road and got in the road and was running in the road. And he followed it to the road and it stopped. And he said he heard its feet hit pavement 4 times. And he said it went into the neighbor's driveway and walked up their driveway and into the woods behind their house. And when he finally told me about this, which wasn't immediate, it was a week or so later, he finally told me about it. Uh, he told me that, again, 4 footfalls into a particular neighbor's driveway, 45 feet from where it entered the road to when it entered the neighbor's driveway. So it had a very long gate. I'm thinking 8.5, 9 feet gate between
Wow.
steps. And he said it sounded like someone running barefoot at the pool on
Right.
concrete, on the asphalt.
Right.
The flesh was slapping against the ground. And so that was his encounter. And of course, I thought he was messing with me because he knew I had an interest.
Right.
I'd watched documentaries on TV, of course, and I always had an interest in the subject. Um, but later that summer, there were several people who told me that they had had encounters in the neighborhood. That
That
summer,
same
there were,
that same summer, you mean they had there was
yes, yes, there
okay.
was other people having encounters. That summer, the 2005, two new homes were built right next door to us. And my thought was that this thing was traveling maybe on the ridge that, and it's actually Walden Ridge, which is, I think it comes all the way from Virginia to Alabama. It's a long ridge line that runs down through eastern Tennessee and down into Alabama. And I think it was on that ridge, and it got curious as to the motions and the noises and the banging and the beating and the hammers and all that stuff. And it
Right.
pretty much spent the summer nearby. There was one night I was outside. I smoked cigarettes at the time, and I was out on the back deck smoking, and I was whistled at. And it was the classic whistle that you would hear in Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds. And it was exactly like that.
Wow.
And then, of course, there was that incident that I mentioned to you at the conference that I don't like to talk about very often, but I will share. And there is something new I've discovered about that just this week. Of course, it was on my mind because this was going on, and I was beginning to really get anxious about the concept that there's one of these things in the neighborhood. And I had laid down to go to sleep, and I wasn't quite asleep yet. And suddenly, just from just nowhere, I had this vision come into my mind of two large dark eyes surrounded by hair. And I heard a voice that said, "I am here." And then it was gone. Now I've chicken skin. That's kind of,
Right.
it's one of
Yeah.
those things. I
Yeah.
think that was probably the thing that made me keep doing this. I can't lay it down. I can't let it go.
Right.
But that happened, and I did, like I say, recently discover that it's called mind speak, and I've known that for many years. But I just recently discovered that visuals usually don't accompany mind speak. It's just a voice in the head. But I had a visual, and I don't believe that's very common. I'd like to know more about that. I've only heard of one other person that's had an actual visual, and that was just recently on a podcast that I listen to regularly. So, that kind of creeped me out because I did, and again, for the longest time I wrote that off as my imagination, but I could never get away from it. And I've had other people say things like, a good friend of mine who's passed on had an encounter with one, or he was actually out looking. He was driving in Owensboro, Kentucky, of all places, and he got this voice in his head that said to him, "I'm coming out." And as soon as it said that, he looked in his rearview mirror and he watched it cross the street behind him. So that was another one of those strange occurrences. And I've had other friends who've told me about having voices enter their heads and tell them to leave, to go away. You're not safe, things like that.
Right.
And that touches on the paranormal realm, unfortunately. And I don't want to sound like one of those people who absolutely knows that Bigfoot's a paranormal being, but if we look at it technically, paranormal simply just means not normal.
That's right.
We can dumb it down and not necessarily say they're not necessarily this or that, but it is not normal. It's not something that we can easily explain.
Right.
And then of course that summer too, we tried to contact several organizations. I wanted them to hear my son's story and get their thoughts on it. And I'll be honest with you, with the exception of one group, we were treated like hillbilly rednecks. We were just basically just written off. Maybe it was my accent, maybe it was my son's accent, maybe it was where we were from. But I thought to myself, I can do this. And I limited it to East Tennessee only. And I started calling radio stations and I started talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
and it's just grown since. And of course, it's not a big deal. I get maybe um, 2 or 3, maybe 5 a year, and most of those encounters happened years ago. So very rarely do I
Yeah.
get an encounter story that's 24 hours old or anything like that. It's
Right.
always something that somebody has finally decided to talk
Yeah.
about because they just can't keep it in anymore.
Yeah.
So
And I always think too, just the way my mind works, I always think about, I think that people need time to kind of process what's happened. Like your son, for example, it took him a week to tell you.
yeah,
Probably, I mean, I would imagine that it's because, like you said, it is out of the norm, right? It's not
yeah,
normal. We
yeah,
literally have no concept or even words sometimes to
right,
describe some of these encounters. So that processing time, and I think you're right. And everybody processes things differently, right? Like
yeah,
your son was okay to talk about it in a week, but then, like you said, there's other people who take years to talk about their
yeah,
encounters.
yeah.
So sometimes we don't get that real time kind of like, oh, I had my sighting yesterday so that you can go and you know what I mean? Like I don't think
Right.
that really happens very
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. The times that it has happened, I have found evidence. So that's the amazing thing about it. So both of the
That's
times when I've
that's
actually had
awesome.
people, yeah. So when people contact me, um, and I'm able to get there relatively quickly, within a day or so, I found
Mhm.
tracks both times, and I think it was the same one because the track size was pretty much the same, and it was
Yeah.
within 2 miles. They were within 2 miles of each other. So
So with it being so, 7 foot or so, um, that size, did your son get the feeling that maybe it is, or that it was maybe a juvenile? Um, did he get that kind of feel? Kind
he
of
never
like,
did. No, he never shared anything like that.
okay.
He didn't really get a good look at its face. He did
Hmm.
say here recently, as I talked to him more, I'm
Hmm.
trying to decipher some of the things that happened all those years ago.
Right.
He said
Right.
he did see, and he said its eyes were yellowish, but I believe that may have been the reflection from the window in the
Oh
kitchen.
no. Hmm.
So I'm not sure about that, but he did notice its eyes and just that it was very muscularly built, and it to him it appeared to be male.
Okay.
No genitalia or anything was seen, but
It
it just
just
appeared.
gave him that
It gave him a
overall.
male vibe. And
Right.
actually, and I'll just be honest with you, the thing that happened in my head gave me a male vibe. So
Yeah.
for whatever for what that's worth, I
Right.
get. So I'm
Right.
not sure.
Right.
Um, so and
So do you
again,
so I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm
no,
sorry.
go ahead. You're fine.
No, I was just gonna ask, so where his encounter happened, it was in your backyard. Are you guys near a tree line? I mean, did it have to come far out of the woods to kind of be standing where it was standing or
It probably would have had to. Let me think. The ridge was in the front of our house, and it was probably 200 yards to the base of the ridge, and it's a very steep ridge. It's not
so
very high, but it was very
okay.
steep. But there were a lot of areas. You know how a rural neighborhood is. You might have patches of
Mhm.
woods between
Mhm.
houses, and
Okay.
fence lines that are grown up, and there was a
Yeah.
garden across the road from us. Um, he didn't know which direction it came from, but you
Interesting.
know, it it could have it could have been from a completely different area and ended up
Yeah.
where he was. So
Right.
um, again,
Yeah.
I think he attracted it by the noise.
Yeah.
It may have come around the house from the ridge and wanted to see what was going on
What was
because it
going
couldn't see it
on?
from what was on
Yeah.
the other side of the house. So he just
Yeah,
had to
'cause
check it out.
Yeah, because
And
I think their curiosity really
yeah,
is what gets them
yeah,
seen, you know?
yeah, I do too. I think it was curiosity more than anything. I can imagine. Of course, I didn't hear it. I was sound asleep, but uh, the a metal shovel on a metal bed of a metal truck at 2 a.m. surely that's got to rake on somebody's emotions. So that had to have gotten its attention. So.
Right,
Plus
right.
we had we did have grapevines in the backyard, and we had an apple tree and a pear tree. So
Okay,
that may have
so
been something it was a routine it had gotten into to begin with, and it was heading to maybe pick a grape or grab an apple or something. And
right.
you know, because
Yeah,
I never thought in my wildest dreams that would even have happened in East Tennessee. So I mean,
yeah.
they don't exist in East Tennessee. They're all out in the Pacific Northwest. But I was wrong.
Exactly. That's
I
so
never thought.
true.
And of course everything just snowballed from there. So
Yeah. Yeah, like here in Florida, like a lot of people are like, "Pff, there's no Bigfoot, there's no Sasquatch, there's no skunk apes, there's no, like
yeah,
they're like, oh, Florida, you guys are nothing but beaches. You know, there's no forest there. There's no,
yeah,
and I'm like, if people really saw the
exactly.
habitat we have here,
Oh yeah,
it's unbelievable. I mean, they have everything. And the reason I asked about the size is because here in Florida, we do have smaller this most of the sightings that we do have down here, they're generally between 7.5 to 8 feet. Very rarely have I heard sightings of anything over 8 feet. Very, very
yeah,
rare. In my my first sighting that I had in 1986, it was a nighttime sighting, but I mean, it was definitely around 7.5, 8,
mhm,
closer to 8. But my
yeah,
daytime sighting it was only 7.5. It was fairly small, very basketball player type body. It
mhm,
wasn't the big, bulky, patty looking kind of, a
yeah.
being. So,
Well,
there's so
my
many.
son's the subject my son saw. He did, he described it very athletic, muscular,
Mhm.
athletic. And it wasn't um,
Beefy.
heavy looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't say it was thin by any stretch. He kindly he said it had man boobs. If that gives you any idea of, it had the Arnold Schwarzenegger upper chest kind of
Right.
thing going on.
Right.
Very muscular, athletic looking. So, and that was just that was the first one, and that was the first time something happened. So if we go a little further on into the year, my then sister-in-law worked an evening shift job, and she follows that same ridge home to a specific area where she turns and actually goes through the ridge to the other side of the ridge. And at that junction where she travels between to get to the other side of the ridge, she had an encounter in December of 2005. And she saw this thing cross the road in front of her and climb a 25-foot high wall in 3 steps. So I don't know how she said it was 15 feet tall, but she was an exaggerator. I think maybe her adrenaline was rushing a little bit. I don't know.
Right.
I can't say for sure. I wasn't there, but you very rarely hear stories of 15 footers, but I have heard
Mhm.
of them. And of course, she told me that story, and then
Yeah.
a few years later, my mother, she was she was going to church on a Wednesday night, and it was fall of the year. The time had changed, so it was already dark when she was heading that way. Church started at 7, and
Mhm.
she drove by the convenience center, which technically it's the dump, and the dump's on the left side of the road, and she saw a large brown cedar tree standing on the right side of the road. She'd never noticed it before. She'd driven that road hundreds, if not thousands, of times over her life.
Mhm.
And when she came back from church about an hour and a half later, that cedar tree was gone. She told me about that. The very next day, I went up and I found a 17.5-inch track.
Wow.
So
That's
there was no cut tree, there was no stump, there was no sawdust, and I have heard several stories from this area where they say they look like a tree,
uh-huh.
uh, a cedar tree specifically, that
Mhm.
disappears or moves. So,
Yeah.
and then I don't remember the year this happened, but it involved my sister and her entire family. Um, are you familiar with the Y12 nuclear complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee?
No, I'm not.
It is where the uranium was enriched for the atomic bomb in World War II.
Okay.
It's a highly classified area, a lot of fences, a lot of gates, a lot of security. But there's a road that travels through it that's public to get from one place to another. My sister was traveling that with her family one night coming back from Chattanooga, and they all saw this thing standing on the side of the road. She claimed it to be about 4 feet tall, very skinny, very gaunt, matted, very poor health, standing there with its arms, its hands almost touching the ground, and it was waiting for them to go by so it could cross the road. So there's 1, 2, 3, plus her whole family, all these people in my family who've had experiences with this thing, and here I am, the one looking for it. So I'm the one wanting the answers. They don't want nothing to do with it. I guess maybe if that happened to me, I'd understand. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it happens like that sometimes though. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it does. It happens
right.
like that. You know,
Yeah, it's all
when we
around us.
yeah, and when we least expect it is when it happens, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I'm expecting it anytime. Maybe I shouldn't expect it anymore. So,
That's
but
it. That's exactly
yeah,
it. Now,
right.
what was the name of that facility? I got to write this down because I have to look it up. Me
Okay.
and my curious mind. What's it called
It's
again?
part of the Department of Energy, the Y12 nuclear complex.
Y12.
Y-12.
Okay,
Yeah,
Y12 nuclear complex.
and it's in
Okay.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee. That's 2
Okay.
words, Oak Ridge.
Okay. All right. I got to check that out. Um,
Yeah.
I wonder, it's interesting their description.
Hmm.
Um, wow, such a stark contrast to your son
Yeah.
saying that the one that he saw was
Right.
literally beautiful, that it was like
Yeah.
the hair was perfectly groomed and actually like was shiny and attractive. I'm just
Yeah.
so, it's such a different thing. So if they all looked like what your son saw, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But we don't. I just love hearing the different descriptions that people, you know what I mean? That I just
Yeah.
because the
That
contrast
would
of
it would seem
all.
that they're just like people, I guess. And maybe they are people of some sort. We don't know just yet, but they
Mhm.
they're all different. I mean, that should be a telltale sign that there's something different about them. If they're all different, they don't all look the same. I mean,
Right.
you look at all German shepherds, they all look pretty much the same.
Mhm.
Unless you know your dog, it's
And
just another dog.
right.
But with something like Sasquatch, I mean, they have different facial features, they different structures of their bodies.
Mhm.
They're all
Mhm.
different, just like we are. So that that keeps my mind open to the possibilities. So I
Yeah.
certainly don't believe that they are just another unrecognized ape. And the term primate gets thrown around a lot. It's just an undiscovered primate. Well, don't let that fool you, because
Mhm.
technically and scientifically we are considered primates. So they may be hiding some truth from us by using these technical terms to
Right.
kindly keep us from
Yeah. And
thinking.
Henry White here says, and it waited. Not many animals
Yes,
wait. They don't wait.
right. Yeah,
He's so right. He's so right about that. Like a deer
yeah,
isn't gonna hang out until till the car passes by.
right.
A bear's not
That's
gonna wait. It's just gonna be
yeah,
like, you know what I mean? So good point,
yeah.
Henry. That's such a good point.
That shows a different level of intelligence,
hundred
not
percent,
instinct.
a
So
100%,
yeah.
100%. Um, what do you think in your okay, so all right, you're in East Tennessee. what are the number of reports that you're kind of, what are you getting, like a week, a month? Like how many reports are you taking
I
in your area?
sometimes, I mean, I've gone for probably 2 years without getting the first piece of information. That's
Mhm.
why the festivals and the conferences are so important to me, because people are there and they come up to me and talk to me. They'll tell me their stories, but just off the cuff, very rarely do I get anything from anyone. It happens, but again, it's few and far between. And I don't know necessarily if it's the lack of them being here as much as it is just the way we are around this area. We don't want to be talked about. We don't want to be made fun
Mhm.
of. We don't want to be ridiculed. I mentioned the Y12 plant. Um, People have to have government clearance to work at a place like that. And if they start
Right.
saying they've seen something kooky or crazy, that might endanger their
Their
job.
clearances,
Yeah,
right.
and
Good
so
point.
I mean I understand that, and I don't press anyone that works there to tell me anything, and I don't
Yeah.
want them to get in trouble for anything like that. But I
Yeah.
know that people are seeing things down there because
Yeah.
you know you see it outside the fence. I know it's going
Mm,
inside the fence.
well, let me ask you this. Do you think, because this creature that your family saw, do you think that it was in that condition due to possibly the nuclear stuff going on from this complex? I mean, do you think that there's
That's
some
possible.
possibility? I mean,
That's possible. Several
yeah.
years ago, there were some issues brought up about the way they were handling their containment of some of the waste that was in that area. Now that was a
Oh,
long time ago. I think they cleaned up, like the EPA's cracking the whip on some of this stuff. But
yeah.
at one time they were lax, and I don't think it was negligence as much as they just didn't know what they had. You
Right.
start thinking, you
Sure.
looking back on the history of the atom bomb and radiation and all that stuff. People really they were playing with fire. They really were. They didn't know the
Mhm.
effects. They didn't know what long term effects would be on stuff like that. My grandpa worked in a particular area of another part of that system, that DOE system. Before it was actually DOE, I believe it was under the military at that time. Um, he was the maintenance man, and he got something under his fingernail, and he almost lost his finger over it. And they didn't know what it was, but it finally cleared up. But how often do you get something under your fingernail that causes your finger to rot? That's there was something serious going on there. He was cleaning
Yeah.
up something nasty. It may not have been radioactive, but it's some sort of chemical, some sort of something. So
So
yeah,
it could
I can
just,
definitely
yeah.
see.
Yeah, because I mean, they're going to be looking for, they're going to be, they're going to be consuming, they're going to be consuming food sources from that general area, if that's where they're from.
Right,
They're going to be drinking water that's
right,
in the surrounding areas, right? So it's a
yeah,
good possibility that that's why it just,
yeah,
these had
yeah.
these
Now,
attributes of something that
right.
looked very sick or very ill or very, maybe, hate to
But
say it, but I
you
mean,
you mentioned that. You mentioned that. In recent years, the government has opened up the land for deer hunting in the fall. But if
mhm.
you take a deer, you have to take it directly to their checking station, and they have to check it for any sort of radiation. They run the Geiger counter over all that stuff, and if it's
Wait,
hot,
wait.
you don't
Huh?
keep it. Exactly. Yeah, it's something that. Yeah,
And something too, with the description of it being, so let's think about it just for a second. So the description being 4 foot tall, but yet its hands, what did she say? Its arms like hit the
its hands
ground,
almost touch the ground, almost touch
which
the
is
hands below its knees. That's how
okay.
long its arms were. So,
Well, I
so
guess,
maybe
that would be
again.
a normal size, right? I mean, don't they
Well, yeah,
normally? I
yeah.
mean,
That's
I'm trying to,
a
because
usual
I'm thinking,
description.
yeah, well, because I'm thinking maybe this was a deformed, when it was born. I mean, maybe it was a birth defect. You know what I mean? From being exposed, from mom being exposed to,
Right,
you know what I mean? Like,
right,
um, while she's pregnant. I don't know. I'm a mom, and I think my mind thinks like
right,
that.
right.
you
That's a
know,
possibility. Yeah.
But
Sure.
it could be that, or it could be the environmental, something that they're coming in contact with. Have there been any other reports of strange, ugly, kind of, strange heights or skin or, fur matted reports in that area that you're
Not,
aware of?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I have received. I've received a couple reports over the years from that area, not necessarily in the fence or in the perimeter of the uh,
Mhm.
facility, but outside the facility. I've had two other reports that reported the cedar tree type thing,
The
where
cedar
it looked
tree.
like a cedar
Okay.
tree standing on the side of the road or moving off the road. The best way they could describe it
Mhm.
was a large brown cedar tree. So
Mhm.
I guess that's a common thing. So they
Yeah, I
figured that
mean,
one out around here.
yeah, here in Florida, I know a lot of the reports talk about, that they just kind of step back and then they almost like they disappear. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
people. So and I hear a lot of reports, a lot of researchers talking all about how they will not move. You know what I mean? Like stand there like a
Yeah.
statue. Like they know, because it's like our eyes are attracted to movement, right? Not necessarily like,
Right.
we're as soon as we see something move, that's what usually draws our attention to it. You know what I mean? Like, so wow, these are so interesting. I love hearing about all of these different encounters. I have so many questions. I drove
Pull
you
up a few
crazy at
more
the
out of my head.
conference. Huh?
Let me pull up a few out of my head that are really odd, and some of them really struck me. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories.
Hmm.
Um, One particular story was from my hometown where I live now in Clinton,
Okay.
in the city limits of Clinton, actually. Odd story. And he contacted me probably in 2014 after I'd moved back from Missouri. Um, he had went fishing on the river, and there's a place not, my goodness, not 300 yards from the Anderson County Sheriff's Department. That's how close. Under a 4-lane bridge is where he was fishing. And he noticed when he got there, there was a tree trunk, looked kind of like driftwood on the
Hmm.
bank. And he was fishing. And over the course of 2 hours, that tree trunk moved from the bank of the river into the wood line. He watched it slowly. He kept his back turned, but he would turn back and look. He was
Yes.
fishing. He would turn back and look, and over the course of an hour or so, it had made its way into the tree line and was gone. But he said it
I
always looked like an old dead tree trunk. Now,
That is interesting. Now I have spoken to researchers who have caught something similar to that on video,
okay, right?
where they had the I always call them subjects. I know people get like, they're all like, what are they just she talking about? This is like, it's not like a criminal, but we don't know, right? I mean, we
Right.
see, like they got it on thermal, right?
Yeah.
So I call it a subject because not for nothing, nobody could actually prove anything. But the subject
Yeah.
was was behind a log
Uh-huh.
and kind of peeked its head, like kind of brought its head up, and then like it went down, and then it was like super slow. It took minutes to go all the way down,
Yeah.
and it was like, when they caught that on film, that movement, that it taking like minutes, like it just going super little teeny bit at a time. So
Yeah.
that is very interesting that you got that
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was one of the first reports I got, and when I first started doing this, I was the undiscovered ape guy. I was just like all the other mainstreamers, and I wasn't about to go deep into anything
Mhm.
weird. But there was
Right.
no way out of it for me. It just everything got deeper, everything got weirder. I had a report from the actual city limits of Knoxville, Tennessee, in a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood. The cul-de-sac was probably 50, 75 yards from a 4-lane highway. And a lady living at the end of the cul-de-sac, not in the cul-de-sac, but one of the houses. The cul-de-sac itself was empty. There were no houses in the cul-de-sac.
Okay.
Just right there at the very edge. She was the last house. She pulled in, turned the car around, and was getting the groceries out of her vehicle. And she noticed the kids in the neighborhood had put a basketball goal, a portable basketball goal, in the middle of the cul-de-sac. And standing behind that basketball goal at a 10-foot height regulation backboard, there was a Sasquatch. She could see its body from its chest down. And every now and then it would peek out from behind the backboard to look at her. And I truly believe it honestly thought that it could not be seen because it could not see her.
Right.
It was almost a childlike thought process for this thing. And it was standing there watching her unload the groceries. And of course, she quickly did that and went in the house and turned off the lights and locked all the doors. Then she contacted me. That cul-de-sac had a lot of garbage thrown back into the woods where a house could have been built.
Okay.
Old pallets and tires, washer and dryer. That has been something that I've found common with sightings. Is there's garbage, not garbage, but refuse. Old things, old discarded electronics and TVs and things like that, where maybe rodents or something might live, where they might want to go and hunt them down and try to eat them. I don't know why they're there, but they're attracted to that old stuff. So I've had several reports from areas that are like that. Junkyards, for example, old car places. I don't think they're interested in the cars. They're just whatever's out there that they might find to eat.
Right.
But the fact that it was hiding its face, and I had another report come in where this thing was had approached a couple of guys who were in a field. It was in a field, and they were at their back door of their house, and they both had their flashlights, and they started walking toward it, and it turned and ran, and they started running after it. They said it wasn't really that big, so they weren't too scared. But when it felt like maybe they were getting too close, it got down on all fours and covered its face, covered its head, and put its head into the ground. Just stood and just laid still. And that's when they stopped, because they wanted to keep that distance between them. They were all ready to go, and as long as it was running away. But when it stopped, they stopped. And it just stopped and just hid itself. And it's almost like maybe it thought it was hiding at that point. It's kind of a strange mentality that maybe some of these things have. And I hate to say things. I don't want to be disrespectful to whoever or whatever they are. I really don't. I just don't have a good name for them other than Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And I don't even like the term Bigfoot.
I know, me neither. I don't like it myself. I usually use the term Sasquatch, but unfortunately the algorithm on YouTube likes Bigfoot better than it does Sasquatch. But I do hashtags for both in my description. So then that way I'm covering both bases.
Yeah.
But it's just so amazing to hear these, hear all these different encounters, but so much of the behavior, even that the descriptions are different, but the behaviors are just, they're all very, very similar. I mean, him literally from his chest up, he's behind the board, and he's thinking, he's literally thinking like, nobody can see me. Like, you're right. That's very childlike. It's a very childlike, mindset, I think, for him to be kind of, that's interesting. Did she happen to say anything like whether it was well groomed or not? I don't know.
No, she never went to that extreme. She just noticed the peaking was the most important thing to her. The fact
That
that it
was
was just so big, it was huge.
right.
She said it was just huge, and I took that to mean, broad-shouldered, large body, big legs,
Mhm.
big arms, just a very large being that was
Right.
that was hiding like a child. So
So do you think that since this one was a very, very large being, Sasquatch, do you think that it was, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to work out what I want to, how I want to ask the question. Was she intimidated by his behavior, or just more of she was intimidated by the size of him?
the
The
size
size.
scared her.
So, so he
Of
didn't,
course, I would imagine anyone who
yeah,
has gone through life being told all their lives that these things don't exist, to
yeah,
suddenly see that happen, that's going to be
right,
intimidation enough,
right,
obviously. So
right.
I think it was just the fact that she was out there by herself in the dark with her
And she
arms
just
loaded with
felt weird.
groceries, and she had
Right,
no way to defend herself if it did want
right,
to do something.
right,
So she just, yeah, she was just afraid of the fact that it was there.
right,
So, and
right.
now, of course, her kids play in that cul-de-sac and all that. So that made her rethink her paradigm. It blew
Right.
everything out of the water. So, and I found that to be the case with most of the people that I talk to about this stuff.
Mhm.
It changes their lives.
It
It really
does.
does.
Yeah, it
Some
does.
people run from it. Some people run to it. And
Yes.
it's one fella that I know had an encounter. Uh, he was coming back from a baseball game in Lower Roane County, and this was the
Mhm.
same time. This wasn't far from where I used to live, so just a few miles. And this
Mhm.
was one of the tracks that I found that was 2 miles apart. He came around, he crossed a bridge and came around the curve, and it was walking across the road in front of him. And he was in a high lifted Toyota 4x4 truck, and he had to look under the sun visor and up to see its head. It was so big.
Wow.
And it just leisurely walked right on by him and didn't give him a second thought, didn't stop to look at him, didn't turn its head. It just walked
Didn't
on by like, you're
right.
nothing to me,
Yeah.
nonchalant.
Yeah.
And that's where I found a 16.5 inch track there.
Now
And
that's a, these are big tracks you're talking about, 16, 17
yeah,
inches. These are very, very big. I mean,
yeah,
those are some big boys,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
I mean, it's not as big as some that I've heard about out west, obviously. And again, I think the one that he
Mhm.
saw was the one that I had found the track of later on, where a young lady on 4th of July, actually, she
Mhm.
was going to work. It was around noon in the afternoon. It was right at noon when she passed through, and she said there was something sitting on the ground, digging in the dirt under a large tree across from a particular church on a particular road. And her mom contacted me, and I went there 24 hours later and found a 16.5 inch track. So, and I can
So
I can
when
share that with you anytime if you'd like. So
so when you say that it was digging in the ground, so this
she
was
said it was sitting on its behind,
uh-huh,
and it was digging
with
in
its
the dirt
hand
with its
or
hands.
with its hands.
Yeah. And she said,
Hmm.
there's no way on this earth it was a cow. There was no way on this earth it was a dog. She said it was just massive. It was huge. And of
Wow.
course, that goes right along in line with what the other fella saw um, a couple years earlier, a couple miles away. So I think it
Hmm.
was the same one. And that particular area is probably, as the crow flies, less than a half a mile from the perimeter of that DOE facility.
Uh-huh.
See, so I think they live in that on that facility because it's safe.
Because right, I was just gonna say that because they are protected there.
They're protected there. Nobody's
They're
supposed to be there.
protected. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the conspiracy theorist in me believes that the powers that be know they're there. And, you know, if they're not causing any harm, they're not causing any harm. They don't have an answer for it. So
Right.
I guess they just leave them be. And nobody can go in there and do anything to them because nobody's allowed to be there. So
Right.
that's just
Holy
a thought.
cow. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about because for me personally, you know, my son and I we started our journey looking for the skunk ape. I mean, that's what we
Yeah.
started. That's like that's where we started, and then it was like it was almost as if we got like this. We got fast tracked into the
Yeah.
paranormal. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
as soon as we made the decision to go further into the subject than just watching some TV shows.
Right.
As soon as we made that decision, it was like, okay, when we're out here, we're having this happen to us, and then this is happening to us, and then
Yeah.
we're hearing this and we're seeing this, and then we get back home, and then we have these things happening and this thing. Like, I mean, when you're out there and you're looking, I mean, are you having any kind of like paranormal type experiences, like, ghosts, EVPs, orbs, like anything like that?
Personally, no, not me.
Okay.
I'm probably as out of tune as the most out of tune human being when it comes to those kinds of things. I really am. I'm out of tune. I'm just out of kilter with that kind of stuff. But I have surrounded myself with people who are in tune.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have friends and members of the group. I'll have one girl. She's a medium, and
Mm-hmm.
she's a very good medium. And of course, I have people who have abilities, you could say. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
believe that there are people out there that are like that. And another thing I would say, I think a lot of the people who have encounters, there's something about them that's different. A lot of the people, that I've talked to, one of the questions I ask them is, do you consider yourself gifted in any sort of way? And most of the people do say they are. Had one girl up at a place called White Pine, Tennessee, up near Morristown, Tennessee. She had this large black lab that
Mm-hmm.
something threw out of the wood line. There was a little patch of woods behind a church beside her house. And this patch of woods, I would say, was probably a half acre, just overgrown with some pine trees and a thicket. And the dog ran out of the house and ran over to that thicket, started barking heavily, and took off into the thicket. And she watched this as her dog literally left the ground coming out of the thicket and was thrown probably 6 to 10 feet out of the thicket. So something picked the dog up and threw it back out. And then, of course, the dog ran back to the house. We went and investigated the area. I went into the thicket. I saw nothing out of place, nothing odd, didn't feel anything strange. But as we were leaving, her mom showed up and was talking to us. And she said, "Oh, yeah, my daughter, she's always having crazy things like this happen." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, my daughter, she can touch a tombstone and tell you how somebody died." I said, "What?" So, needless to say, I didn't leave for another hour.
You're like,
We talked
wait,
about
what?
that. Exactly. So, she has, according to her and her mother, an ability to go up to any tombstone, any gravestone, and tell you how the person died by touching the stone. And yeah, I can't say that they don't have that ability, but
Well,
uh,
exactly.
and then again, several of the members of my group say that they have a sixth sense, empathy. Have there's something more to them. Of course, I don't have that. I just, if I do, I don't know I do, because I've only had that one instance in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the people I deal with are sensitive, and I actually recruit people from the paranormal realm because they, ghost hunters and people like that, because they know things, and a lot of people are attracted to that kind of stuff for a specific reason, because they've seen something, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And people who see ghosts and people who have those kinds of experiences usually have to be a certain type of person.
Yeah.
I could probably walk through the most haunted house in the country and not see or hear a thing because I'm just not in tune. I'm just not in tune. So I try to surround myself with people who are, and
Yeah.
that helps quite a bit. There's a particular photograph that's going across Facebook right now, or the internet, so to speak, of this a very gnarly Bigfoot face. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the medium that's in my group, she's able to tell whether or not something has a spirit in it or not, whether it has life. Just
Okay.
even looking at a picture, she can see if someone's living, dead, or not at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she
Right.
says this picture she gets absolutely no vibe whatsoever. So she's thinking it's either artificially generated or it's some sort of a mask of some sort.
Yeah.
And I'll take
I
her
mean,
word for it because she's proven herself to me.
yeah. Paranormal Pixie, Laura, she makes a really good point. She says it sounds like she has the natural ability of psychometry, which is receiving information from objects.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's for her being able to kind of like pick up on if the headstone thing from the lady's daughter, and then your team member being able to kind of like figure out if
Yeah.
something is someone. And yeah, I mean, I have abilities. I don't have those kind of abilities, but but I am an empath. I'm an intuitive, and
Yeah.
things channel like things channel through me, like, but it's all
Yeah.
natural. Like, it's funny because I can't. People will be like, "Oh, can you pick up anything?" And it's like, yes and no. I can. I read energy. I can do that, and no, I can be like, okay, and I can read energy, right? I can do when I want to do it.
Right.
But all of my other abilities, they just happen when they happen. It just happens when it happens. I have no control over. So, like you earlier in the very beginning of the show, and you were sharing with us about, what you saw and what you heard, but I have had that. I have had that happen to me one time. I've had other communications, but nothing where it was kind of like an audible voice thing, like, and images. That's only happened to me just, like one time with a Sasquatch. So that's happened to me, but but it's never happened to me again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Was it a one-off? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm
Maybe
wondering
so.
if it was just a one-off for me, but it kind of hooked me. It really did.
Yeah.
It hooked me. I believe I said before the show, I can't lay it down. I just can't lay it down. I can't let it go.
No.
I'm no longer trying to prove they're real. I know they're real.
Right.
And I don't care if anybody believes me or not. They can make fun, they can laugh. I think there will come a day when I'll get some vindication. I'll get an "I told you so" out of this.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that entails, but I've people question me all the time. I'm just
Saying,
I am who I am. So.
One of the other things too that helps me, and I don't know if it will help you, but have you tried meditation? Do you meditate at all?
I'm a spiritual person, but I don't necessarily do meditation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't go that deep into it. It doesn't. It's not that kind of an effect on me. It's really not. I'm not scared if that's anything to it. It just, that particular incident just was very unnerving. It was.
Right.
But
right.
I guess. And now that I think about it, I think that there have been some opportunities that I have passed on because I just got a feeling that I should go to this particular location at this particular time. Maybe that's.
It sounds to me like you have abilities, Matt.
No, I don't. I guess I don't. I thought it was just being a scaredy cat. To be honest with you, just being
No,
a chicken. So
no, not at all. It's about sometimes, like I tried, like when I was a kid, I
yeah,
always, there were two buckets. I had two buckets. Something was either good or something was either bad. Like, I
yeah,
didn't know how I mean, I didn't know I had abilities back then, but I would always knew, and people call it your gut. Some
yeah,
people call it your intuition. Some people
right.
call it, there's a lot of different names, right? But when
Uh-huh.
you have something in you that's kind of like, yeah, no, that doesn't sound like a good thing for me or a good choice for
Right,
me.
right.
That's an ability, my friend.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
an ability, my
Maybe so.
friend.
Maybe there's something there. I don't know.
But
So
listening to it is the really important part, you know what I mean? It took me a
yeah,
long time to, because I would always second guess myself,
yeah,
and going through life, I would do that. I would do I would I would know not to do something, or not to
right.
talk to this person, or not to go with that person, and then every
Yeah,
single time I would second guess myself. I would do whatever, and then I would always regret it and go, "Why didn't I listen to myself? Why didn't I listen to my gut? Why didn't I think of?" And now it's like, if
yeah,
I get a feeling, I get a feeling. If
yeah,
something is telling me
yeah,
don't do this or don't go that, I don't.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah. I mean,
whatever.
there's been. I mean, it hasn't happened very often, and it's always been Bigfoot related. It's always been, oh, I can take you to a place, and I don't
Mhm.
know if it's necessarily uh, the idea that or a fear of what I might see there is the real motive of the person maybe taking me. We got to be careful. There's a lot of people out there that are out to get you one way or the other. They might try something, they might try to rob you or worse. You just got to
Of
be careful with
course.
stuff like that because there's
You
there's a lot
do.
of bad apples out there, and I never go
Mhm.
with anybody by myself. I always take a team member or two, so we've always got that going on.
And
So
I'm sure if you're in Tennessee, you're packing.
yeah, there's no, and that's something I wish I didn't have to do
Right.
because
It's the
I've always
people,
been
right?
told that Sasquatch knows, and I don't want them to think I'm a threat.
Yeah.
And it's really, if I'm packing, it's definitely not for their benefit. It's for my
Right.
benefit, and for
When
my
I go
goodness,
out,
who knows what's out there in the woods? And it's
yeah,
not really animals anymore that you got to worry about. It's people. It's
that's right.
it's people
That's
who are
right.
doing
Yeah,
unsavory things. So,
whenever I go out, whenever me and my son go out, or I go out with anybody, like, I mean, there are weapons.
yeah,
I personally do not carry.
yeah,
I personally don't, but I always go with people who do.
yeah,
But you know what? I mean, I'll tell you what. First of all, intention is everything. I believe that
yeah.
they totally understand our intentions.
Right.
And even if they didn't, understand our intention, I literally just say it. I mean, I like, when
Yeah,
I go out, like, I'm all about, "Hi, I'm
yeah,
Marty. This is so and so, and that's so and so, and da 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 da
yeah,
da, and we mean you no harm,
yeah,
and
yeah,
these are for, our protection. These are not to harm you." Like,
right.
I do, like, I just say things out loud. Like, we're
Yeah,
here for higher learning. We're here, we're open to an interaction. If you're willing, if you're open to that, we're here.
yeah,
Like, I mean, I do. I just put it out there, because every time I've done that, every time I've done that, I've always walked away with something. Always.
right.
Something, even if it's very tiny. I always walk away with with it, some kind of an experience of
Right.
something,
Yeah,
you know, something paralleling us out, walking,
right. Yeah,
I mean,
that's always creepy.
isn't that creepy?
It
Isn't
really
that the
is.
creepiest thing?
Yeah,
It is
it
so
is.
creepy. Hey,
You don't see
Krista.
anything, but you definitely hear it. So
Yeah, it's so
yeah,
funny. Like, yeah, I had an experience. My son and I had an experience where it we went into an area, and we were leaving. It was time for us to go, we were leaving. And usually when they have paralleled us out of other areas, even this area, even this particular area, like it's kind of like a common thing. Like we kind of know that they're going to do it, but this particular individual, he just was very what is the word? He was very like big man on campus about it. You know what I mean? He was all
Yeah.
like, "That's right, I'm paralleling you out of here." You know what I mean? He just had this like bravado about him. And I literally like my son and I were literally, I was like, "Do you hear this right now? Like, are you here? Like, we're talking to each other. Like, we're talking to each
Yeah.
other as we're walking out, and we're just like, do you hear this right now? Like, he's being super obnoxious." And my
Yeah.
son literally just like, we stopped. We stopped and we were like, my son goes, "Okay, I think that's enough. You better calm yourself down because we're leaving. So you better just stop." Like he just really literally gave him the what for. And I
Yeah.
want you to know that he literally totally changed his tune. He literally like slowed up, and
Yeah.
then he went about another 12 feet. And then he just stopped and let us finish walking out on our own. It was hilarious. I was dying. I was like, "You go." I was like, "All
Yeah.
right." He
Well, see,
totally
that's an
understood what you
interesting.
said.
Do you believe he understood English or just knew the thought process?
I think he understood the intention and
Uh huh.
his body language, because Matt,
Uh-huh.
Matt, my son's name's Matt. And so he kind of like turned in that direction and was kind of like, "All right, that's
Yeah.
enough." He was being very like, "Cut it out. We get the
Yeah.
point. We're leaving."
Yeah.
Like, so I think it was that intention, body language kind of thing that he totally picked up on. And he was kind of like, "Okay, maybe I'm being a jerk, you know?"
Yeah.
But
Wow.
it was
That's
funny. It was a
interesting.
very funny moment, actually.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
So, yeah, I had a couple of members, one who's passed away and one who left the group. And that might be something I want to touch on here in a moment. But they went to an area where our friend Scott Carpenter used to research.
Okay.
And Baker Creek, I believe is what it was called. And
Mhm.
they had asked his permission, but it's an open area. But they were kind enough to ask, and of course he was well enough to say, "Sure, go ahead, have fun." Uh, and when they got there, the male friend got zapped, got nauseated really bad, just right out as soon as he got out of the truck. We can't stay here. I've got to go. I'm sick. I just can't do this. So they got
Mhm.
back in the truck and they turned around and left. About a mile down the road, it quit. Okay, I feel better now. Feel better. Let's go back. So they go back. And when he gets out of the truck, he starts feeling it again. But the female researcher, she steps in front of him and the woods, gets between him and the woods, and it stops. Doesn't affect her at all. And when that happened, she has a video recorder. Now this is very interesting. What happens here? I've not
Mhm.
told a lot of people this, and people look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them. But this comes from them, so I can only believe what they told me. Uh, the woods started coming unglued. Trees started snapping. Bushes were shaking. There was yelling. There was screaming. There was all this racket. There was anger. That trying to scare them away. And she's recording this the whole time that's going on. And they finally decide, we're getting out of here. We're not going any deeper into this place.
Mhm.
And they got in the truck. They left. And as they drove away, she turned on the recorder to see what she had actually recorded, and it never happened. The camera was taking a recording of very still trees, no noises, no bushes, no rumbling, no screaming, nothing. It was just a quiet, peaceful scene on the recorder. So I think
Wow.
I think that whatever was zapping him projected that into their minds so they would think that was happening, because the recorder didn't pick any of that up. the video recorder did not pick up any of that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the strangest thing that's ever happened to my group, and probably one of the strangest things I've ever heard. And I've shared that with several people, and their jaws kind of drop. They don't know what to make of that. Uh, I
Mm-hmm.
think they have an ability to control what we see and how we process what's going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
Just like being zapped. There's all these stories of where people see them disappear, and it's kind of like you're looking through a fire where it's kind of just shimmery, and they
Mm-hmm.
just disappear. Maybe they're not really disappearing. Maybe they have an ability to control us somewhat. I think
Mm-hmm.
infrasound may have something to do with that,
Mm-hmm.
because infrasound can really mess with our heads if we look into it deep enough. It's a pretty deep subject.
Oh, it
So
is.
if they're able
Absolutely
to
it
do
is.
that, and that would take away some of the paranormal aspects that we
Mm-hmm.
consider really strange, like the cloaking and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying they
Mm-hmm.
can't cloak. I don't know whether or not they can, but it's very possible that they can somehow manipulate our thought process in order for us to
Mm-hmm.
believe that they just
Mm-hmm.
cloaked, or they just
Mm-hmm.
disappeared, or that they were making a lot of noise when they weren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So uh, people are gifted. People have the ability to see things like we've been discussing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're on a much higher level than we are as far
Right.
as that kind of stuff is concerned. I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to look at that possibility. So
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, I have always felt like a true researcher is a truth seeker.
right,
Now, a truth seeker follows data, right? We follow data. That's what you do. When you're
yeah,
looking for answers, you're going to follow where your research leads you.
right,
I mean, it's not that far of a jump to go
right,
from, okay, wait a minute, her camera doesn't have, we don't have photographic or audio evidence of what she described that
right,
didn't actually happen.
yeah,
So yeah, what can infrasound do, and
right,
what are the symptoms of someone that is under that kind of,
yeah,
hit with radiation or gamma rays or all these,
yeah,
there's so many different things.
yeah,
I personally tend to, again, I don't know anything. I am not an expert. I only, we just have conversations on here. That's all we do is have conversations. I'm not an expert. But me personally, I believe that it's more of them knowing how to project um, frequency and vibration. That's
yeah,
that's that's what I
yeah,
believe. Um, Now, as far as like them, possibly cloaking or whatever, I just did a show a couple of weeks ago with Robbie Rains from DAX Machina's channel, and we talked about adaptive camouflage and
yeah,
how there, and my son and I have some hair samples. We had samples that we had analyzed, um, and I shared all of that information. I shared, we had someone video, analyze the hair under a microscope for us. I shared the video of that. We showed a lot of, so the hairs we found here in Florida were colors of all kinds. We
yeah,
found, they were kind of like green, they were red, they were brown, they were black, they were blonde, they were strawberry blonde.
yeah,
Some of them were just absolutely clear, perfectly
yeah,
clear, like fiber optic cable.
right,
So, I don't know. I mean, we talk about, how they just seem to kind of vanish into thin air. I mean, maybe it's no more than them just standing still and
yeah.
blending in to their environment through the type of hair that they have. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we think about some of the big cats tend
Mhm.
to use infrasound, and
Mhm.
what science claims that these cats do is they confuse and disorient their prey just long enough to catch them.
Yes.
Maybe
To like stun them.
maybe these beings are able to confuse us and stun us just long enough for them to go away.
That's
I've heard of missing time in regards to Sasquatch. So if they have, let's say they could confuse us with their infrasound or their whatever for 10 seconds, 10 seconds, we could be staring out into space and watch them disappear when in reality they walked away. But that's our perception of what actually happened. And yeah, that's just, I think that's probably that's a concept that I'd really like to dig into, but I'm not scientific, so I don't really know how. I just read and I try to figure it out. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Again, you mentioned experts. There are no experts as far as I'm concerned. We're just trying to figure things out the best we can. And
exactly.
So if a big cat can stun a deer just long enough to catch it, just long enough, maybe these things could do the same kind of thing with us.
You never know.
Maybe they do that to catch their prey as well. So
that's also possible.
Yeah,
I mean, there's the possibilities are endless because nobody, I mean, perfect example, right? People are like, oh, I heard a wood knock. Okay, you heard a wood knock, but you didn't, we all can make the argument but you didn't see what made the wood knock. And are you sure that it wasn't a pop that they made with their mouth? Are you sure it's not a hand clap? Are you sure it's not some, them slap their chest or, you know what I mean? Like, we never know.
Yeah.
There's so many, it's just speculation, theories, things that we just kind of run with sometimes.
That's one thing I've never done. I don't wood knock and I don't go out in the woods and yell and scream. I don't know what that means. I'm afraid of what it might mean.
It could be a marriage proposal for all we know.
It could be, and I'm taking. So I don't know.
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, look, that could have been a marriage proposal. So you just better be very careful.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Like you never know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I know. I don't know if you heard it at the conference, at the Gatlinburg conference, where I'm going to have DA Roberts from DA Ex Machina on in a couple of weeks. And one of the things that DA does is he has this this clicking thing. He does this like that, but I mean it's loud. And he was over at the Small Town Monsters table and he was all talking to them. And then he did this like click, and he said everybody that was all around, everybody stopped what they were doing and were like, looked straight at him. And they were like, what is that sound? It was just like, flipped people out.
Yeah. So I've heard that's part of their language. So
it could be so many things, we just, I tell everybody all the time, and Shane happens to be in the chat tonight. He is my, I guess I'm his fan. I don't know. I'm not a stalker or anything, but he's like my favorite researcher in the world is Mr. Shane from Ozark Mountain Sasquatch. And I geek out on when him and Randy like post stuff. I'm all like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Oh my gosh, look at that. I just get so geeked out, but it makes my mind. That's why I asked you when you said that the witness had told you that they saw the creature digging, like sitting down on its tush, digging in the ground. That's why I asked you. I'm like, well, what was it? Was it using a tool? Was it hand, like that's those kind of things. It just makes my brain. I have to.
Well, I don't think she could have been really close enough to have known for sure if it was using a tool or if it was using its hands. She said it was using its hands, but I mean, it was sitting probably 20 feet off the road under a tree.
So
kind of down
it could have been using some sort of a tool.
And now when I got there, I had to break the law and trespass. I crossed the fence and went down there. I didn't find anything where anything had been disturbed other than that 16.5-inch track. And I only found one track. Of all,
And what?
the tracks I have found, I've always only found one. I've never found a mate, or I think, and I want to say every one of them has been right,
A right
not
foot?
left.
Always a right. Okay.
Yeah, never left anywhere.
What kind of
So
substrate are we?
it's just odd to me.
Yeah. What kind of substrate are we talking? Are we talking like grass? Are we
Oh,
talking
it's
like clay?
well under that tree, it was just hard dirt. It had
Hard dirt?
rain.
Okay.
It had rained the day before, and
Okay, so
it looked
a
like it
little
was
soft.
kind of damp.
Uh-huh.
The other track that I found was in grass.
Okay.
And then the track I found where my mother saw her cedar tree was in mud. So,
How deep was that? Or did you get
oh,
any
it
of, did
was
you cast any of these or?
no, no, I never did bother casting any. The one in the grass was uncastable. The one in the semi dirt was too shallow. And of course, I was trespassing, and the neighbor did come out and ask me what I was doing there, so I had to leave.
You were like,
And then,
well,
and then my mom's track was full of water. It was just full of water, and I couldn't make out toes, but just a very large, just everything but toes.
yeah.
So around here, I've never had the opportunity to really. I've got a couple of castings kits, but I've never used one.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, here in Florida, it's really difficult because we have, we don't, it's just the ground is not very good. And in this, I mean, unless you're in the swamp and, and there's like something in mud, then that's a little easier. But I mean, most places that are,
you got some very large leaf litter down there, right?
Yeah. Well, like it's either, it's either full of water or it's just really not, or it's sugar sand, which you can't cast anything in sugar sand. Even if you put hairspray on it, it's not going to happen. Sorry, everybody. Don't mean to burst anybody's bubble, but sugar sand's not your friend when you're trying to cast a print. But I just find it fascinating. I always like to ask, the conditions, you know what I mean? Like I always ask people conditions. Like I always like to know the context of the story, right? Like, like was it, perfect example, like the story that you told about, your son's, your son's sighting. Like I find that to be super, I mean, I want to pick your son's brain at this point because I find that sighting to be, because okay. So as like when he jogged away, I mean, to have that kind of description, I don't think I've ever heard a description given about it, about a sighting that they saw it kind of have a strange gait and it kind of jogged away. Like it didn't go like hightailing it out of there. And yet he really didn't head for the woods either. He was running down the middle of the road. I don't think me personally, not that I take tons and tons and tons of reports because I don't, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody ever give a description that after the Sasquatch realizing that they saw it, that it just kind of jogged down the middle of a road for quite a ways. I've never heard that before. That is so interesting to me.
It has crossed my mind a few times since my son did follow it to the road that perhaps it wanted him to follow it. That's a very creepy kind of a feeling. Who knows? Good point. I don't know. Because I don't know the intent of these creatures. I don't know what the intent of that particular being was. Right. It may have been nefarious for all we know. But he did follow it. He didn't leave their yard. He didn't leave the yard. And I'm thankful he didn't leave the yard.
And and at no time did your son ever feel afraid or threatened. At no time. How
Not
long?
until not until he got back home and got done and got in the house and really thought about what had just happened. I think
Right.
the adrenaline was kindly just running the show at that point,
Sure.
and that's what kept him. I guess that's what made him follow it.
Mm.
Complete disbelief that these things existed anyway. So
Yeah.
maybe that just he threw all abandon to it. So,
Yeah.
but
Gary
he tried.
Spikes. Gary Spikes actually makes a really good point. Perhaps that it was injured and it couldn't
Yeah,
run. So
could
that's a
be.
good point. That's a really good
Yeah,
point too, Gary. Yeah.
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 So
It's so interesting to me. Like, I love hearing these things and it just makes me like, I just
yeah,
keep getting.
yeah. It's just, and I mean, if you want, after the podcast, if you don't mind, I can send you some pictures of some of the tracks I've found over the
Oh,
years.
that'd be
Uh,
fabulous. I love
there's a
stuff.
farm. There's a farm that's not 5 miles from me that I've been investigating for several years, and
Mhm.
dead cattle, dead chickens, dead dogs, and tracks. Lots of tracks.
Wow.
One track in particular, I'll send to you. It's almost like a deformity. So there's something wrong with its foot. So
Okay.
but I think, yeah, you'll see it. It's pretty
Okay.
interesting. I'll send you stuff on Facebook.
I would love that. I would love that. I'm putting the link to your channel into the chat, to your
Okay.
YouTube channel. So I'm gonna do
Now
that. So
there's not really a lot there. I don't
that's
have a
okay.
lot there.
That's okay. My
Yeah,
I try to help everybody grow their channels. Like I'm I'm still a very young channel myself. So I know we all need to help each other, grow our
yeah,
channels. And, if it's, it doesn't matter, because I know you do have some stuff on your channel because I've been there.
yeah,
So you have
yeah.
some stuff. So
Well, I
everybody go
appreciate
and
that.
check out Matt over at his YouTube channel. I put the link in the chat. It's also in the description, in the show notes. Where else can we find you? Are you on
I'm on
Facebook?
Facebook.
Do you have a
I
Facebook
have a
page?
web. I have a straight up web page. Not very much to it. It is for the most part a segue to the Facebook page where I do most of what I do,
Okay.
and I don't bombard people with stuff. If it's not happening, it's not happening. So I don't make it up
Yeah.
as I go.
And what's the name of the Facebook page? Is it
It's East Tennessee
East
Bigfoot. Yeah,
Tennessee Big? Okay, so it's East Tennessee Bigfoot. Okay,
yeah,
that's the name of the page. All right, everybody, make sure you guys go and check them out on Facebook as well. And then we did have a couple questions. I did star them. And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Matt, please put them in all caps. If you're, I would appreciate it. And Hofcats, wait, where's the best place to contact you? I really like to have you guys go. Oh, yeah. Hey, Hoff. It's the nonabus@gmail.com. You can contact me there, or on Facebook. As a matter of fact, I think you and I are already Facebook friends or something. I don't know, but that's my
yeah.
email if you want to get in touch with me. So anybody has any questions? So okay, Jimmy Crack Corn had a question earlier, and his question was: has Matt noticed any patterns in your area? Have you noticed any patterns?
Fall of the year. I'm expecting at least one report this August and September. Fall of the year. There tends to be a lot more activity when it starts cooling off.
Okay.
September, October, the leaves
September.
start falling. Maybe that's when they start moving to another location
Hmm.
for the winter. I don't know. Maybe moving south. I don't know how that works for them. But
Right.
I get a lot of activity that time of year, especially at this farm that I investigate. It's always happening around the fall of the year.
Right. Okay.
But
And
other than
then
that, to me, it's random.
I'm sorry, I thought this was a question, but I think Jean Hudson, I'm sorry, Jean, I saw it was all in caps. I thought it was a question. She just said it didn't scare his son, so he's seen him for what he was. So she just made a statement, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. I
Yeah.
like that.
Uh,
Um,
yeah. It had a negative effect on him in the long term. So He's
Yeah.
got some issues. So some
Yeah.
trauma.
PTSD is a very real thing,
Yeah.
it's definitely a very real thing. So, you know, it's, because we just sometimes don't know what to do with this information that we've seen.
Exactly.
We've,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we don't know
I
how to
would
process it.
I would almost think that I could probably handle a sighting because I've done this for so long, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know until it happens.
I will tell you this. I have another researcher that's a friend of mine, Jay Bachochin, and my very last interview I had with Jay a couple of months ago, he literally he's been researching for more than a decade. Okay,
Yeah.
just Sasquatch, right? He was always into paranormal and UFO type stuff prior. That's kind of where he kind of like, that was his first love, right? Then he started Sasquatch, right?
Right.
He didn't have his actual first sighting until just a few months ago, and we already had the show booked.
Okay.
So I got to actually interview him very fresh, coming
Right.
out of that that interaction that he saw.
Yeah.
I reached out. He's going to be coming back on in a couple of weeks. He told me, he's like, I'm still not over it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he's been out there searching for more than a decade, and he still is having trouble,
Yeah.
like, processing what he
Yeah.
saw, and he's out there on purpose. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and he's super dedicated too. Like, I mean, he lives in Wisconsin, and it's like, it could be like 3 foot of snow, and he's still going out there. It's like 4 in the
Yeah.
morning. I'm like, you're crazy. Like, I would not do that. Like, no,
He asked for it. He got it. It still messed
yeah,
with him. Yeah.
but I mean,
Yeah.
for
So
real, though,
it's that big a deal. It's that
yes,
profound an occurrence. So yeah,
yeah, it
I get
shifts.
it.
It is a paradigm shift that happens to every single one of us.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
matter whether you were looking for it, whether you were not looking for it, it
Yeah.
shifts your paradigm, because
Yeah.
you have to sit there after you've seen this. You have to sit there and literally say to yourself,
Yeah.
my world is not the same
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
not the same. Never going to be the
Yeah.
same.
I understand that
Yeah.
concept. I do. It's not yet materialized, but I do understand the
Yeah.
concept. Yeah, there have been a few things in my life that shifted my paradigm somewhat, but they were they weren't 8 feet tall and covered with hair. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Children, that was a paradigm shift. So
Yes.
having kids, that being a dad, that was a paradigm shift, but in a good way. But something like this, it's a life changer for sure. Everybody I know that's had this experience, it's changed them. It really has. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's right.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I had such a good time. We've gone an hour and a half, and
Awesome.
I still have, 18 people in here. Like, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, I
And
appreciate them staying and listening. That's very good.
everybody, definitely, if anyone who has, now, where do you take reports? Do you only take reports in East Tennessee, or
I
other?
I only take East Tennessee reports, but I know a lot of people.
Okay.
I may be able to get you in touch with somebody in your area if you want to
Okay.
talk about it, if you want to
Awesome.
pursue it. So
I love that.
if I can, I will. If not, I'm good friends with a few people that
Mhm.
are really in the know with this kind of thing, and yeah, I can hopefully hook you up if it's not East Tennessee
Okay.
for sure.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And also too, I mean, I'm sure you would be an amazing resource for, say, someone who contacted somebody who's in Texas.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And they can go, hey, Matt Seeber, he's your go-to guy over there in East Tennessee,
exactly.
right? So
Right.
works
Yeah.
both ways, right? I love it when we can all
Yeah.
do that and work together. So
Absolutely.
I'm so thankful. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Okay,
I
I'm gonna put
appreciate you.
okay. You're gonna stay in, just don't leave the stream. I'm just going to put you
Okay.
backstage for just a minute. Let me say goodnight to my peeps over here, and I will be right with you. Okay. Thank you so much, Matt.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow, guys, another amazing show in the books. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Again, if anybody has, needs to, give a report, East Tennessee area, reach out to Matt and those researchers out there who might get some reports from people in East Tennessee. Send them Matt's way. Matt Seeber, East Tennessee Bigfoot. I'm going to put his channel in the chat again. And go over and subscribe to Matt's channel over there. Catch up with him on Facebook. That's another way to reach him. Another channel I want, excuse me, guys, my voice is going. Another channel I want to make sure that I plug tonight. Hold on one moment. I got to grab it real quick. My apologies. Another channel I'm trying, because I want to grow their channel too, is the Paranormal Voice. Oops. Ignore the date and the time over there. That was for something else. I'm sorry when I copied and pasted it, guys, but that is their YouTube channel. Go over, subscribe to Paranormal Voice. If you haven't already, please go do so. We're trying to get them to 500 subscribers. They do a lot of travel, a lot of conferences, a lot of stuff. They, and they really, really could use our help to grow their channel. We really, really appreciate it if you guys could do that. Do not forget to go and subscribe if you have not already to the Blondes and Booze Paranormal Podcast over there, Krista and Brandy. Make sure you guys are subscribed to their channel as well. Do not leave my channel without subscribing to their channel. They're amazing. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. Hey, Pyromedic, I just saw you popped in. Thank you guys. You guys are wonderful. And don't forget, what do we always say here? Don't forget to do what? Spread love and kindness wherever you go. Don't forget that. And I will see you guys tomorrow night, 8 p.m. We have Barb Hartman, who is an experiencer, and she is going to share some of her amazing audio and a few photos. So make sure you guys are here tomorrow night at 8 p.m. because Bob Hartman is going to bring it. I promise you. I promise you she's going to be bringing it. So I will see you guys tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Have a great evening.